Hello, friends. Lee C. Camp. You're listening to No Small Endeavor. This is our unabridged interview with Munther Isaac. Munther is a Palestinian pastor and theologian, and we're discussing his recent book, Christ in the Rubble, on the war in Gaza. It's a hotly contested book, both well received by many, sharply critiqued by others. Munther has done the challenging work of pastoring his congregations through a time of war, grieving the madness and violence, all while holding to a conviction that Christian discipleship requires a commitment to nonviolence. It's a remarkable book. Munther joined us from his home in Ramallah in the West Bank. Here's Munther Isaac. Hey, friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I've been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. Hey, my friends, have you ever wondered what's actually in your tap water? The truth is, contaminated water can look totally clear while still carrying pollutants that pose real health risks. And here's another surprise. Many common fridge and pitcher filters barely touch the most harmful contaminants. Some bottled water even contains microplastics. So, what can you do? Consider AquaTrue, the countertop water purifier trusted by thousands. It's been independently tested and certified to remove 84 different contaminants, including chlorine, lead, PFAS forever chemicals, and microplastics. Its patented 4-stage reverse osmosis system delivers exceptionally pure, healthy water without any plumbing or installation. AquaTrue has been featured in Business Insider and Popular Science, and Good Housekeeping named it the best countertop water filter. And customers agree. 98% say that their water is cleaner, safer, and healthier. Plus, it comes with a 30-day best-tasting water guarantee. Head to aquatrue.com now to get 20% off your purifier with promo code NSE. That's aquatrue.com. AQUATRU.com. Promo code NSE.
Every Christmas, I think about the gifts that really matter. Not the wrapped ones under the tree, but the ones that change someone's life forever. And recently, I heard a story from Mercy Ships that I just can't shake. A mom brought her little boy on board. He'd been living with a condition that could be fixed with a simple surgery, but there was no surgeon anywhere near his village. After his free operation, she said, "You've given my son his future back." Y'all, that is a Christmas gift. Globally, 5 billion people lack access to surgical care. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's only one surgeon for every 200,000 people. But Mercy Ships is stepping into that gap in the most beautiful way, bringing free, life-transforming surgeries to people who would otherwise have no access to care. They help the blind see. They straighten twisted limbs. They remove deadly tumors. They treat cleft conditions and so much more. With state-of-the-art hospital ships, they provide safe surgery for children and adults completely free of charge. And it's all powered by an all-volunteer crew of surgeons, nurses, engineers, cooks, people who give their time and talents to make the world better. And here's where we get to help. Your donation provides free, safe surgeries to people in desperate need of hope. This Christmas, you can make your impact felt, and every gift is matched. Please donate today at mercyships.org/podcast. That's mercyships.org/podcast.
A warning that this segment contains graphic descriptions of the effects of war. Munther Isaac is a Palestinian Christian theologian who serves as pastor of Hope Evangelical Lutheran Church in Ramallah. He also directs the Bethlehem Institute of Peace and Justice, as well as the highly acclaimed Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. He's the author of numerous books, his most recent being Christ in the Rubble. He holds a PhD in theology from the Oxford Center for Mission Studies, and he's joining us today from Ramallah. Munther, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Lee, for having me, of course.
Yeah, we're grateful for your time. You know, it seems to me that you embody a number of identity markers and commitments that some might find surprising to find all in one human being. You're Palestinian, you're a Christian, and more, you're a pastor. And as a pastor and a Christian, you're committed to nonviolence and reject any forms of terror or war as consistent with Christian discipleship. And it seems to me that is a particularly difficult set of realities for one person to carry in the context in which you find yourself. But how did you begin to find your way into that complex set of commitments and identity?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think of it as such because we, as the Palestinian Christian community, feel a very natural connection to the land we live in, whether it's Bethlehem or Jerusalem or Ramallah, where I am now, or Nazareth. And I know that many times people are surprised to know that Palestinian Christians actually exist. However, it should be a surprise if we did not exist, because Christianity started here. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So we've been a continuous part of this land. We view ourselves actually as the indigenous people of this land. And we feel that we are a continuation of the first church. And so we don't think of ourselves as an odd mixture or an odd mix of the fabric of this land. On the contrary, we view ourselves as an integral part of the identity of this land. And even when you talk about nonviolence, actually, this is one of, and just to delve into the topic immediately, one of the biggest misconceptions about Palestinians and the Palestinian struggle for independence and liberation is that it has always been a violent struggle. But in reality, the majority of Palestinian struggle has been nonviolent. Now we articulate it as Palestinian theologians as creative resistance in the logic of love. We find theological basis, biblical basis for it. But many, especially in the Palestinian civil society, have for many years called for civil society kind of nonviolent resistance. So to me, all of these identity markers are actually natural things that come to us, especially as a Palestinian Christian community.
You grew up in the West Bank, and when you think about your childhood and your becoming a young man, what do you look back upon as kind of key markers that contributed to the person that you have become?
To begin with, my childhood, the memories that come, of course, in addition to playing in the neighborhood with kids, like any normal kid, the memories that come to mind are the first Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, which again was very much a nonviolent struggle, marches, demonstrations, of course, sometimes throwing rocks at soldiers and the Israeli military in our neighborhood. And at the same time, trying to connect this or make sense of all of this in light of my faith. I grew up pretty much a Bible-believing kid. From as young as 9 or 10 years old, I was committed to going to church, to every meeting, to Sunday school. From a young age, I was committed to reading the Bible page to page. On a daily basis, on an annual basis, I would just cover the Bible. When I was 13 or 14, I think I finished it for the first time. So faith was always something important to me. You can look at one of those very devout kids who never used a bad word, very obedient, goes to church all the time. But looking around me and seeing the struggle of the people, questions that rose at that time, varied. Some were, can we throw rocks at soldiers? Does that contradict our faith in nonviolence? And I remember one of my friends actually who used to say, when I throw rocks, I pray that I miss so that I don't hurt the soldiers. I mean, that's the kind of, innocent, young children kind of mentality we had. But I must admit, I also struggled with the whole, issue of Old Testament, Israel, chosen people. It didn't help that in the Palestinian translation of the Bible, we don't have a distinction between Palestinians and the Philistines. So whenever David, who's supposed to be the hero of faith, was fighting, he wasn't fighting the Philistines, he was fighting in our equivalent Arab, the Palestinians. So, again, in our simple naivety, we just connect Palestinians with Palestinians, David with Israel, something, we warn against today. And we write that you shouldn't do that. However, at the time, you just don't think of it. So how do I understand the Old Testament? And I remember at age of 14 or 15, I wrote a paper in my school in the religious education class, who are God's chosen people. So my point is, even at a very early stage, being both a very devout person who goes to church and, growing up in a very conservative environment, memorizing Bible verses, but then being part of the struggle for liberation, with our people, seeing the demonstrations outside of the house, living all of that, you can't help but wonder, what's the connection? How do I reconcile both? So that was, a very important element of who I am today.
What's your earliest memory of your lived faith, some sort of conception of relationship with God?
Well, I think I was 10 years old, and it was a summer camp for a very conservative Presbyterian church that I grew up in as a child. It was our dream to go to those summer camps, and at the last days, just because of the activities, but of course, that included memorizing verses, learning about the Bible. The character we focused on was Daniel, his non-compromising kind of character. Daniel 1:8 was the theme of the camp. That Daniel did not compromise, and his friends with the diet food and so on. And my memory is at the last day, sitting around the fire, the pastor calling us to make a commitment to follow Jesus. Me being the perfect or ideal kid, just, yes, I want to do this. And it actually was an important, very important, I would say, episode of my life. Yes, I was young, but I think it put me on the right path. And I remain forever grateful for that, not just experience, but whole upbringing in that church, because I still go back to that treasure, that resource of Bible verses I memorized in that church. And I still value, something that I don't think ever left me, this importance of a personal relationship with God. And so I've been to different places in my theology and my understanding. I've never, ever envisioned myself being involved in political things or appearing on media. In fact, as a teenager, I resented politics. And my pastor encouraged us to resent politics because we thought, that's from the world. That's the kind of upbringing I was part of. But I will always be in debt for that upbringing, for that church, for that pastor, and the whole experience, for setting on the right path when it comes to taking my faith seriously, a relationship with God, and almost like a nerd kind of knowledge of the Bible. I was that kind of man who went to seminary knowing the Bible, who knew the Bible maybe better than, in my arrogance. But you get my point, is that I really knew the Bible.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of last question about childhood or teenage years or maybe even early 20s. I was just wondering, what kind of things do you love to do? What kind of hobbies?
Football.
Football.
You call it soccer. It's football. Where we actually use the feet, not just to kick extra points.
Yeah.
We loved it. It was what we did for most of the time. We don't have many things, of course, and I hope people don't imagine playing football on green fields. No, that means on dirt in the neighborhood. That was the thing we looked for the most. And even in curfews, even when when we're not allowed to be in the streets by the Israeli military, and all these, sneaking in and doing that, because, to us, love of football was everything in our neighborhood. I still like to play from time to time, but don't have the time or the energy maybe to do it.
I think I saw that you also maybe play guitar.
Yes, play music. I love music. First, it was the flute, silver flute, and later I taught myself to play the guitar, to play in the youth group, to lead songs in our youth group, which I was leading when I was 16, actually. So, I was so much immersed in my church and church activities. We needed someone to lead songs, hymns. So I said, I need to teach myself the guitar, and that's how it began. I still play guitar in our church now, even in our Lutheran tradition, even in my robe and liturgical. I introduced, let's do contemporary music with guitar, and people love it. So again, that's another thing maybe I brought from that upbringing that stayed with me even today.
Yeah, if any non-Christian music you like to play when you're not in the church building.
I used to play in a music band with the university students. We played cultural songs, national songs because again, that's when the second Intifada happened, the second Palestinian uprising, which was more violent, more dangerous, more troubling. And we used to play music about Palestine all the time. We filled theaters. That was fun. The kind of semi-popularity we had at the time as students who were good at music and played, as I said, songs for Palestine. I'm not that good in Western music, to be honest, but yeah.
Well, I would... I'd like to kind of move towards asking you some questions about your more recent experience. And first, I would just like to note that I know over the last number of years, you've done so many interviews and you've written so much. And I would make up that it's got to be exhausting sometimes to continue to retell some of these stories. So I thank you for your willingness to share with us today. And I don't take that for granted. But as you think about the midst of something as horrible as this war, I wonder if there are any particular experiences or images or firsthand accounts that kind of regular when you think about trying to get at or point at the horrors of what's happened. What are some of those that are kind of ready to hand for you?
There are many stories, and I think this is now the tragedy, the reality of being a Palestinian is that, especially those in Gaza, of course, will carry with them wounds and experiences for the rest of their lives upon generations. But for all Palestinians outside of Gaza, the first few months of this war were very brutal. First, the coverage was more intense. And we were glued to our screens, to our mobiles. Today, you get not just news and information in multiple ways, whether it's social media and so on, but today you've got so many people who, influencers, if you want to call them, or chat groups that just send you constant images from what's happening in Gaza. This is the kind of new reporting, a building is bombed and people immediately run towards that building, which is surprising in itself that the people of Gaza don't run away from the building, but run into the building to rescue people. And, they always carry phones to document what's happening. So the images we saw and we continue to see, but throughout the 2 years, especially in the beginning, were horrifying. It's not the kind of images you get on the Western media. I don't think, you see such things of entire families pulled from under the rubble, of schools which became refugees when bombed. I hate to share this, but you see body parts spread all over rooms. When you think back, it's traumatizing because the images were hard, but also the human emotions were hard. There was, and it's hard to talk about it, honestly. There was one image of a father on top of rubble and walking around the rubble, shouting the name of his son, and leaning down and shouting with his, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Trying to put his mouth in front of, in the middle of stones, hoping that any sign of life, and people, around him, realizing, no one is alive, and they're not knowing how to tell him that, and he's like, no, let me shout. I mean, this is just one image that among many others that we saw. It honestly, it was, the whole period was so intense, and then you have to make a decision, Lee, and it's not an easy decision whether to continue watching, whether to shield yourself from these images and to say this is not good. And to me, the choice was clear. I can't become numb to such images. I can't just get used to it, and I can't ignore it. I need to be angry by it. I need to cry whenever I watch. I need to be moved by it, so that it fueled my activism. You can't just look away or scroll down when you see a parent, or even a child, in hospital and so on. The images, as I said, were intense, were many, and it was so brutal that, as I said, it definitely left a long-lasting impression on all of us. And I think we need to pause here and remember, we're watching from distance. I mean, I know Gaza is 2 hours from here. We have the fear that it could happen here, but this is nothing in comparison to what the people of Gaza themselves experienced for 2 years. For 2 years, every single day. It did not stop. And I remember a friend from Gaza telling me at the early stages of the war, I think few weeks into the war, how what they experienced in those few weeks is more than all the previous wars combined. He said the previous wars were like a walk in the park in comparison to the first weeks of that. And then imagine that it lasted for 2 years. So that's what we can all, that's some of the things we can remember. To be, I mean, and I can then add to that other dimensions, if you wish, that were troubling to us.
Yeah, I would like to ask, because we'll certainly explore the kind of political, social dimensions of your work. But before we move to that, I would love to hear more about just purely at the kind of pastoral level of ministering to your local congregations, or to friends in Gaza. What's that pastoral experience been like for you?
Yeah, not easy, because you yourself need to be pastored, and it's not as if I had a peaceful heart to be able to help. I mean, I myself needed comfort and help. And again, that's nothing in comparison with those in Gaza. Pastoring, it becomes also more difficult because we functioned in also a context of anger towards Christians around the world, who in the first few weeks of the war made horrible statements that made us angry. So that was also another dimension of our anger. But to try to speak on a on a weekly basis every Sunday to our congregation was by no means an easy task, especially knowing that in one of the congregations I pastored two churches back then, one in my hometown of Beit Sahur, and then the big one in Bethlehem. The one in Beit Sahur had people from Gaza, people who left Gaza, and people who left a long time ago, but their family is still in Gaza. And some lost loved ones during the war. So what do you say? And how do you comfort? And that's when you realize, many times it's not what you say, but the love you show, the support, the presence you make with those people, the constant asking, how's everything, and so on. Because theologically, with such intense killing as we witnessed in the first weeks of the war, coupled with the fact that we prayed for this should end, Lord, stop this, and it seems that your prayers are in vain. You realize, what can I say? And actually, to me, that was an important moment. We prayed on one day, one evening in Bethlehem. We met different churches at the Church of the Nativity where Jesus was born. You think this is the holy place, and we all met. From different church backgrounds. We prayed for protection for those in Gaza, especially those hiding in churches. We knew them, they were talking to us, and for a ceasefire. And I remember, I went home that night, again to the news, and we hear that the church is hit. And then, you keep scrolling, refreshing, where people killed, and then you realize many people were killed. Next day we discovered the full number, 18 people, and that's when you wonder, does God even listen? Does He care? And then you discover, as I said, some of our church members lost their loved ones. So what do you tell them? They can't even say goodbye. They can't be in a funeral, and they are hearing traumatizing stories because some of the survivors were forced to have their body parts operated on without anesthesia. I mean, can you imagine the amount of pain for an old woman to go through that? And then you go talk to her sister, and she's like, what can I do? So it was difficult. And, I kept looking for things to say to people. And my book, Christ in the Rubble, is actually the fruit of that, because I was intentional in trying to find things to say to the people. And many times when you say things, you just, you don't think of what impact they will have. So when I said, God is under the rubble in Gaza, when people ask, where is God? Why doesn't He listen? I said, I don't know. I can't, but I see Jesus asking the same question. I see God on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? So I said, God is under the rubble in Gaza. And, few days later, it became a saying, a meme circulating all over social media after the sermon was translated. You don't think at the time of the impact such words can have, only to realize that, God used these words to speak to millions around the world. And to me, it was just my insistence on, what do I say? I have to be intentional. I have to find anything to say to people.
Yeah. So that sermon also becomes the title of your most recent book. And you began in chapter 1 talking about October 7. But would you describe for us, as a pastor, you preached the next day. What's your experience of October 7, and how do you try to narrate that experience to your congregation?
Well, we all lived it. I mean, we all lived through the very slow, by the way, unfolding of information. None of us knew what was happening. It was totally surprising. What we saw is images of Palestinian militants in Israeli settlements shooting at people in the streets. We were shocked. I mean, how did they get there? No one knew the full scale of that day until 3-4 days later. You have to remember that. At the time, we thought it was less than 100 who were killed, 100 Israelis. But the first impression was shock, because none of us ever thought that the siege around Gaza can be broken by force. We have this impression of the Israeli military as unbeatable, and their technology as, on top of the world. No one can break that surveillance system and break them. And then, when you just realize later that they've done it in multiple locations, that's one. How did that happen? I mean, that's another question in itself. But to us, it was shock. And then the shock turned into fear and anxiety, knowing that retaliation is coming. In Palestine, every time Palestinians attack Israelis, especially Israeli civilians, Israel retaliates maybe 10 times more. We never thought it will be a 2-year war, of course, a genocidal war, let alone. So we were anxious, we were afraid. I mean, you see immediately people, even in Bethlehem, going to the stores and buying food, to store food in their homes. We knew this is going to last long. And just to remind people, I don't know if you know the details of that day, in addition to the ground attacks that the Palestinian militants did, there were missiles from Gaza into the Israeli territories. These are not technologically advanced missiles, so they miss. And when they aim at Jerusalem, they hit near Bethlehem, they hit. So everyone was afraid. We hear the alarm from Jerusalem and the Israeli areas. And the first thing we thought on that morning, we had school, is how to evacuate the school. And just imagine the chaos among these children, out of fear. What's happening? Why are we going home? Then they hear the sounds, they hear the bombs, they hear explosions. We send messages to parents, come and pick your kids. It was just a very, very difficult day. And as I say, after that, just one update after the other, we were shocked by what happened. For example, the attack on the music festival, the extent of that attack was not discovered until a day or two later. None of us knew that, they committed horrible crimes on that level, that hundreds were killed on that day. We saw the images of attacking military bases. We saw soldiers being captured. We saw a tank on fire. But then gradually, we discovered that, it was much worse than that. It's a day, no one wanted to see. Let's just say that. It's a day no one wanted to see. And even from the limited images we saw on day one, I remember saying in church next day, if you have a legitimate cause that does not justify or something to that extent, killing civilians or dragging dead bodies in streets, this is not acceptable. Again, not knowing the full scale of what happened. But sadly, and this is what I've been saying, none of us wanted to see October 7th. Sadly, we saw it coming. And sadly, we knew that day will come.
It has been so delightful to see more and more listeners like you sign up for NSC Plus. Our growing community is made up of intelligent and thoughtful people looking for a holistic approach to human flourishing. Signing up for NSC Plus is also a way to support the show and the work we're doing, and in fact, we depend upon that kind of support. But in addition to supporting the show, you'll get exclusive access to bonus content, and the No Small Endeavor you've come to love will be completely ad-free. In fact, you won't even hear ads like this one. So go to nosmallendeavor.com and click Join NSC Plus to become a member of our community today. Join for as little as $5 a month. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com, click on that red button that says Join NSC Plus to become a member today. That's a helpful segue, I think, into the next question I wanted to ask. And first, I'd just like to acknowledge for listeners that, as I worked through your book, you repeatedly, I don't know how many times, but repeatedly state the horror and the criminality of the acts of Hamas on October 7. And yet, at the same time, you insist upon what you call context. So maybe for those who are perhaps unfamiliar with what you might mean by context, what are some of the key things that you wish more people knew about the context, and that would lead you to say something like, we knew such a day was coming?
Yeah, October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. That's what we kept repeating over and over. And the difficult thing is you can't have a conversation these days, a meaningful conversation about any of these issues without always being labeled or accused, or misunderstood. So pointing to the context is not to justify what happened on that day, and certainly not to justify the killing of civilians or kidnapping of civilians. But pointing to the context is meant to say that it was not as if the Palestinians were living in peace and Israelis were living in peace, and one day the Palestinians woke up and said, we hate the Jews, let's go kill Jews, as is maybe portrayed in many circles, or as is, this is the conception at least. No, there was a context. In the Palestinian understanding, they are responding to years of oppression, years of displacement, years of having rights denied. And in the immediate context of Gaza, which I tried to explain in detail in the book, years of dehumanizing siege and blockade around Gaza, a siege that calculated, in which Israelis calculated the amounts of calories allowed to enter Gaza throughout these years. The people of Gaza just lived one war after the other within this siege. The context is that they also tried nonviolence. They tried to march peacefully to the borders to break that siege. The context that matters, and you would think that would be always said, is that more than 75% or so of the people of Gaza are survivors of the Nakba, meaning they are displaced. The Zionist militias forced them out of their towns and villages, destroyed their towns and villages, and then built Israeli cities on the ruins of Palestinian homes. So Israel as a state, as I kept saying, was literally built on the ruins of the towns and villages of the people of Gaza. You would think that information matters, and that this is not generations, because we're not talking about hundreds of years ago. We're talking about back then 75 years or so. People in Gaza still hold keys to their homes that Israelis live in. So imagine someone coming and kicking you out of your home and then denying you your right, and when you fight back. Lee, what's really important to emphasize is that by the international law, people who are occupied by another military have the right to resist, even using arms, We try to make parallels. I mean, every context is different. We try to say, imagine in the days of slavery, imagine someone who has been enslaved and all of a sudden, after many years of oppression, exploding and killing people. You don't condone or justify the killing or say that's okay, but you understand where it came from. You understand the anger, the frustration. And so there is a context for that war. And after October 7th, we kept hearing over and over, Israel has the right to defend itself, which in the minds of those who use that, including church leaders, the killing of Palestinians is okay. And, that's when, as someone who believes in nonviolence, doesn't support violence at all, I think this is what Jesus taught us. But that's when we become perplexed, because why is it that when Israelis use massive violence, intense killing, it's justifiable self-defense. But when those who were displaced, oppressed, denied their rights, who live under apartheid, use violence, we're never granted the right to defend ourselves. I mean, have you ever heard any American commentator or church leader say Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? Why is it that that right is always pointing towards, granted to the Israelis, but never to the Palestinians? So we were pleading with people: educate yourself, understand the root causes of all of the issues. Understand who is the occupier, who's the occupied, who's the oppressed, who's defending themselves, and so on. And again, the difficulty was having such a conversation without being accused of justifying violence. We don't justify violence. It's those who support Israel who justify Israeli violence against Palestinians, a violence that killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. So that's why, I spent a big amount in the book trying to explain both the immediate context and the wider context of the events of October 7th.
What do you do, given all of the things that you just shared with us, and as you noted at the beginning there of that conversation, that answer, how difficult it is to have these conversations. But, I was looking at some reviews today, and one American, I believe he was an American Christian, said that you were increasingly sympathetic to terrorism, and what do you do with that kind of critique, given all of the things that you just said?
I used to get angry, to be honest. I've been accused all sorts of things, but that again points to the environment we live in which you can't have a conversation without being labeled. But given the existential challenges we are facing as Palestinians, the last thing I could care of now is how people perceive or think of, and I'll definitely not tone down my language. I'm just calling things for what they are. I'm just being real. I wish people who disagree with me engage with the facts, engage with the evidence that I give in the book, with basic history, with basic information about things that I experience on the ground. And where things become really frustrating and where you really become angry and even resentful is, when people begin suspecting your daily experiences or questioning the validity of what we experience as Palestinians on a daily basis. I live this thing. I live it. Who are you to come and question that experience, to question everything I go through on a daily basis? And at the same time, one of the things I wish people consider more is the question is, what would you have done if you were in our place as Palestinians? What would you do when someone takes your land, pushes you out of your land, your homes, your villages, destroys them, denies you the right to return and rebuild them, then denies you your political rights, and imposes the restrictions on your movement, on your family registration, whom you can marry, everything that I try to explain how much control they have of our life? How would you respond? In America, there's this whole discussion that people talk of a God-given right to carry weapons to defend their property. But what about come and walk in our shoes before lecturing us and before throwing these labels at us. And and we need to have this conversation with all honesty. And I know that sometimes people think this is controversial. How do you say? But we need to think, because terms like terrorists, why is it that you don't apply these terms on Israel? Israel is a terrorist state. I say it. Israel terrorizes Palestinians. Israeli settlers terrorize Palestinians where I live in Ramallah. Israel commits horrible crimes against civilians on a daily basis. They did it for an intensified period in Gaza for 2 years. Why is it that state violence, it's okay, but when Palestinians commit violence, it's terrorism? And again, I've been very consistent before writing the book, before the war. I don't support violence, and sometimes I get in heated conversations with other Palestinians when I say I don't support armed resistance. I just feel that the logic of violence does not help. It's a cycle that does not end. That's our commitment as Palestinian Christians by and large. And so to be accused these things makes you wonder, are they listening? Are they serious? Are they genuine? Why did you read the book if you're not genuine, trying to understand what's happening? Because, again, you can't have a meaningful conversation today without labels being thrown at you and without always being attacked to the extent that they raise questions about what I experience on a daily basis.
One of the another label that has obviously been employed a great deal is anti-Semitic, especially when someone, for example, accuses the state of Israel of genocide. Well, it's anti-Semitic to say such a thing. How do you? What are some of the particularities in your mind about how that label is getting used?
Yeah. Sadly, and I must say it, the charge of being anti-Semitic, or the whole issue of anti-Semitism, is today being weaponized against not just Palestinians, but anybody who dares to speak for justice to the Palestinians. And to me, this is a very, very tragic misuse, sad misuse of the charge of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is real, it exists, yet to confuse it purposefully by criticism to Israel is shameful, is really, truly shameful. Our problem is with Zionism and with the actions of the state of Israel, not with Jews or with Judaism. And today, some of the strongest opponents of Zionism are Jews themselves. Israel is a Zionist state. It's not a Jewish state. There's a big difference. In fact, to insist that all Jews must be Zionists is anti-Semitic in itself, because you force Jews to function in a certain way that fits your own ideology. So we need to be careful, and we need to push back when such accusations are used. And when people bring the genocide issue, that Israel is, to accuse Israel of genocide is anti-Semitic, just, I wonder if we pause for a moment and think what we're saying. Because, just recently, I think 2 months ago, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, which is the world's leading body of genocide researchers, has formally declared that Israel's actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention. Are we going then to say that every member of that association is actually anti-Semitic? Really? And then you have Israeli genocide scholars themselves saying that, yes, it is genocide by the definition. Israeli Jewish scholars, some are Zionist. They recognize it as genocide. You have many bodies, including Amnesty International, including Human Rights Watch. You have several UN studies and experts. Are we really suggesting all of them are anti-Semitic? Really? Is that so? Amnesty International is anti-Semitic. Human Rights Watch is anti-Semitic. All these leading genocide scholars, including the Israeli ones, are anti-Semitic. I mean, this is becoming ridiculous. People are turning their attention from horrible crimes, from clear sight evidence, by just putting labels. And the scandal here is that, a genocide is taking place, and when people cry there is a genocide, they are attacked. This is a moral bankruptcy, believe me. And we cannot accept this to continue. And as I said, I'm grateful that many Jewish scholars and activists are now pushing back on not just the misuse and weaponization of anti-Semitism, but also on the fact that there is a genocide that happened in Gaza, and we have to speak out against what happened. And again, we need to fight against such misuse and abuse of this.
In what ways, I have my own reservations about using this word, but let me just put the question out there and see how you respond. In what ways is such a war religious, and in what ways is it not?
That's a difficult question. We insist that the war is not religious in this sense. Making it a religious war means that Jews and Muslims, I guess, are fighting because they disagree on foundational issues, or they can't get along, or they can't coexist. None of this is true. Historically, this has never been true. I mean, there were tensions sometimes, of course, as part of a regional, tribal nature, of course. But to think that Palestinians, Muslims, for example, and Jews cannot coexist, and that this war is fueled by that, is not accurate. It's not true. This war has a beginning when European Jews created Zionism, came to Palestine, displaced Palestinians, and established a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was not empty. And since the very beginning of this, Palestinian Christians as well have been fighting against Zionism, because this is our homeland. How do you establish your homeland on our homeland? So this is the essence of the issue. And then the events of 1948 happened. We were displaced. More than half of the Palestinian people that were displaced. This is where it all started. This is the real issue. So don't make it as if Jews and Muslims are fighting because of religious, reasons. For heaven's sake, for everyone, stop looking at foundations of this conflict in biblical times. Ishmael and Isaac, and this is nonsense, honestly. And this is very common in Christian circles in the United States. Even, when Trump announced the eternal peace plan, as he called it, he said, for 3,000 years, there has never been peace. Come on. It's as if Palestinians and Jews, or Arabs and Jews, have been fighting for 3,000 years. Come on. Where do we get this? And to find biblical... So, this is what we fight against. This is what we reject. And this is what we insist. Please don't make it a religious conflict. You wanted to ask something?
Yeah, well, first I want to read a quote that you had in the book from Albert Einstein, 1939, who you quote as saying, "There could be no greater calamity than a permanent discord between us and the Arab people. We must strive for a just and lasting compromise with the Arab people. Let us recall that in former times no people lived in greater friendship with us than the ancestors of these same Arabs." And then you say, "In fact, an honest assessment of Jewish history shows that Jews suffered most at the hands of Christians, especially in the West, not Arabs or Muslims," which I think is as a difficult and yet honorable thing to hear from a Christian pastor, trying to grapple with the difficulties of this. But the thing I wanted to ask you just a moment ago is, would you give us your precise definition of Zionism and what in the move is particularly problematic?
I mean, this is not my definition. It's what Zionism is. Zionism is establishing a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. And actually, in their early definitions, they talked about a Judenstaat, a Jewish state. So establishing a Jewish state in Palestine. And there are at least two serious problems with these elements. First, Palestine was not empty. So how do you establish a Jewish state in a land that's not empty? So you can use deception, say a land without people for a people without a land. So they describe the land as a land without people. Of course, they meant Palestinians are not worthy even of existence, maybe. Then you use religious language. You say Jews are returning to their land. So it's the Jewish land. It's their land, the Jews' land, not the Palestinians who lived there for generations. And then you openly talk about displacing the Palestinians. They called it the transfer. That's what they called it, the Zionist leaders. So that's, by definition, Zionism is problematic. It necessitates, by definition, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians as described in the minds, as in the statements and writings of the early Zionist leaders. We are not inventing this. Go and read what they said. And then, of course, the concept of a Jewish state, an exclusive state by nature, a narrow state, a religious state. And we see the results of that in the subsequent Israeli governments, which seek to make the Jewishness of the Jewish experience here more superior to everything else. The nation state law, as I talk about in the book, states that the right for self-determination is exclusive to the Jewish people only. This is Jewish supremacy. Friends, we're not throwing labels here. We're not making accusations without merit, without proof. The whole land belongs exclusively to the Jewish people. So this is the problematic nature. And then I can talk about the colonial nature of Zionism. But you see why we have a problem with Zionism. And that's why, as I said in the book, groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, who function from a moral, ethical perspective basis, they say we stand with justice, equality and freedom for all. Zionism is antithetical to all of that. So that's why we don't support Zionism. They're being very honest, very real here with their own assessment of Zionism based on their Jewish ethos. So that's how I understand Zionism. And that's why I kept saying, are these things that I described, removing people, displacing them, replacing them, using violence, exclusivity, are these in line with the Christian values? Of course not. And that's my issue, and that's our issue with Zionism.
You began to get at this a moment ago, but I'd love to hear a little more commentary on kind of the real world effects of competing theologies here, and the sort of theologies of many American Christians that you have critiqued in the book.
Yeah, because theology is powerful. It's not just theology, it's a narrative, because you have built a whole religious discourse based on that theology. A religious discourse that says in 1948 Jews returned to their land, which means that a Jew born in Brooklyn, probably to Eastern European Jews, when that Jew immigrates to Palestine, he's returning to his land. And meaning that me as a Palestinian indigenous, been living here for generations, as a Christian, as I said, we go back to the early church possibly, we are strangers here now, it's not our land. So that's the power of theology, a theology that taught and articulated Jewish exceptionalism, a theology that always related to Jews as a special category in Christian doctrines and theologies, as a distinct people. And tragically for the Jews, most of the time in our history as Christians, they played a negative role in our sub-theology or in our theology. They were always vilified. They were always accused of, these are the ones who crucified Jesus, and so on. And then conspiracy theories came out of all of that. Anti-Semitism is real. We're not denying it. They paid a very, very heavy price, painful, with the Holocaust. But then when Christian theology shifted, it turned into the same mentality of Jewish exceptionalism, Now Jews became a topic in our eschatology. We relate to them, as an object in our fascination about the end times, maybe, and we make them, we relate to them as as we understand them related to the second coming of Jesus, maybe how they help facilitate the second coming of Jesus and the expansion of the Christian empire and so on. That's the origin of Christian Zionism. And now we as Palestinians are paying a heavy price for all of this, a very, very heavy price, continuous heavy price, because this did not end, and this is continuous. So Christian Zionism, we have been criticizing it for a long time, but never so more than today, because we've seen the destructive impact of that theology / ideology on the lives of Palestinians, and even tragically on the Christian presence in this land. In my first book, The Other Side of the Wall, and in this one, Christ in the Rubble, there's so much engagement with Scripture, just to show Christian Zionism, as today we think of it as a theological corruption. It's not compatible with the gospel, with who God is as revealed in Jesus, as we understand him.
What do you see at this point as potential ways forward? These are dark moments, and when we describe them, and I've been just saying this for a while now, when we say these are dark moments, it's not just about the evil, the killing, the despair, but also about the fact that we don't see a horizon. We don't know what's coming. We don't know what's going to happen. No one knows. If you talk to even experts now on the Palestinian question, no one knows what's going to happen. Instead, our focus is on survival. The question right now we are struggling with as Palestinians is, how do we survive this era? How do we survive this moment in our history? Because we know that the battlefield now has shifted from Gaza into the West Bank, and there is a clear attempt to displace Palestinians from the West Bank. It's not as if you have to be smart to. They're saying the Israeli Zionist leaders are saying such things. So what's going to happen? We don't know. What do we need to survive is the question we're asking. Whether it's building stronger organizations, empowering people with more survival instincts, preaching about the difficulties of the moment, and unity that we need, especially these days as Palestinians. And what's going to happen in Gaza in the next week, months or so, no one knows. No one knows. The so-called peace deal, a peace deal that I have raised so many concerns about, because it lacks any concept of justice, reparations, accountability. A war criminal like Netanyahu was celebrated. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, on 21 November 2024. The charges read, quote, allegedly responsible for the war crimes of starvation as a method of warfare and of intentionally directing an attack against the civilian population, and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts, end quote. Joe Biden, U.S. President at the time of the issuance of the warrant, and Benjamin Netanyahu rejected the legitimacy of the International Criminal Court claims.
So can such a thing lead to peace? But then apart from that, you go to the details. There are so many details that were not addressed. And so now they are coming to surface now. And we're questioning, is this real, what they proposed? Who's going to be in charge? Will there be an international force? What's the stages? How long will this rebuilding last? Who's gonna fund it? How long will people last waiting in tents? You're talking about almost 2 million people who live in tents now. You know that. They have no homes. How long does it take to remove the rubble? It's a whole area under the rubble. I mean, there are so many unanswered questions. How will they find clean water? I mean, simple questions that we don't know. What's going to happen in the West Bank? Will it be annexed? Trump says this is a red line. No, Israel is doing it. In fact, on the ground, they're building more settlements. So honestly, no one knows what is going to happen. And what we're saying is that right now, by staying in the land and keeping the faith and the justice of our cause, to me as a man of faith, to keep the faith and justice of God and truth, that truth will prevail, is what's called for these days. It's the resilience, the steadfastness that is needed in these very, very difficult days. And to be honest, that's what I see even my role as a pastor. How do I plant the seeds of steadfastness in the lives of our people?
And our last question that relates to what you just shared there on the sermon you preached on October 8th following the Hamas massacre, you said to your congregation, our call is not to lose our humanity in our rejection of and resistance to evil, and in our self-defense, we must strive not to lose our humanity. And I wonder, as you've worked so diligently and sought to bear witness to what's happening and to pastor in that context, what has that quest not to lose your humanity looked like for you?
Yeah, to me, that means being consumed by anger and the desire to avenge and kill. To me, that means shifting to dehumanizing and stereotyping others and not seeing the image of God even in your enemy. To me, that means, and this is a very difficult thing to say today, insisting that the way forward is not by eliminating our opponent, but by transforming them and moving them into a place where we will live together and share the land. And that's not naivety, because in my understanding, in my advocacy, in my thinking, transforming our opponents and shifting them into that place is an active, could be costly act. And it entails grassroots mobilization around the world to sanction Israel, to isolate Israel, to boycott Israel, until the Zionist leaders and the people, to be honest, because right now there's so much hatred on both sides. But the Zionists and the Israelis are convinced that we can't continue oppressing and we can't eliminate the Palestinians. We have to find ways to live in. As long as the Israelis and the Israeli leaders don't feel obligated to do that, they won't. America is funding these wars that they're doing and is giving them immunity to the extent that a war criminal like Netanyahu, again, does not have to fear the consequences of being labeled as such. And, there's an arrest warrant against him from the international ICC. So when I say, going back to your question, that our goal is not to eliminate, but to transform our opponents, I'm not being naive. I'm thinking of strategies of what we call creative resistance. That is not driven by hate. That does not dream of avenging towards killing. And that's the human nature. And so how do we show the world an alternative? How do we insist that what Jesus said, what you take from the sword will be restored by the sword. In other words, violence will only bring violence. Who's going to have the courage, the wisdom to challenge this cycle of violence? Not losing our humanity is insisting that we are created to love one another. Love is the human character. Even if it means loving our enemy. When we stop loving, we're no longer human. So that's what I meant back then. And now, 2 years after a genocidal war, it's a difficult thing to talk about, but I will insist on this as the way forward, because the alternative is scary. The alternative is, in our context, alternative, it's not an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye will make the world blind, I think someone said. It's not an eye for an eye, it's an eye for 1,000 eyes. Or 100 eyes or something like that. That's a tragic reality we live in.
Been talking to Munther Isaac, Palestinian Christian theologian, joining us today from Ramallah. Munther, thank you so much for the generosity of your time, and we're grateful.
Again, thank you for having me, Lee.
Sparkle throughout the night with Born in Roma fragrances by Valentino Beauty. Each bottle holds the energy of Rome after dark. Donna Born in Roma blends luxurious jasmine with rich, creamy vanilla, creating a sensual and vibrant signature scent. Uomo Born in Roma fuses aromatic sage and smoked vetiver, leaving a lasting impression that lingers well into the early hours. Shop Born in Roma by Valentino Beauty now at Ulta.
Kraft mac and cheese is the best thing ever. It's even better than pop music. You look just as natural enjoying us at age 13 as you do 55. Kraft mac and cheese. Best thing ever.
Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible. Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carrie Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studio.